Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's Remind podcast. My name's David Masterton, and I'm joined by Dr. Ashleigh Moreland. And this week we are talking about resilience. And I can't remember the title, but it's going to be something along the lines of, I suppose, in layman's terms, when it's time to push and to be resilient, and sometimes when it's to stop and listen to go, is resilience actually needed here? Something
Oh,
along
I'm going
those
to even
lines.
challenge from the outset. I just want to delete the definition that we currently have of resilience. Because it's not
Oh,
about are we going to be resilient or not be resilient. We need to change the definition of resilient.
okay.
Clearly,
So
this was an Ash topic because I'm
about
very
and
protective of it. So,
and
kind
David's
of
along for the ride.
off the back of our last episode, I think, Dave, because I was thinking about that, so last episode, if you didn't catch it, we had an Am I the Asshole episode, and it was about your kid not hugging your grandparents when they were or their grandparents when they were leaving, and how intergenerational trauma has kind of pushed us into overriding our nervous system and our own survival instincts and responses to fit the expectations of others. And that reminded me of resilience. And I did a post about resilience, about normalizing no longer pushing through or overriding your nervous system, because
Hmm.
pushing through leads to burnout. It literally leads to burnout. It's not helpful. So my first question was going to be, what were you taught resilience was? But I think you already answered it in how you opened the show.
Well, I
What do
mean,
you think?
resilience is grit, right? Because
Yeah.
here I do believe. Now we might go into a little bit of a circular formula here, which might crash the system. But in my mind, resilience is needed in some parts, right? And the one part that is needed is when you're facing your fears, right? Because without resilience, in my definition, it's the ability to push through when it's not comfortable. Because anyone will do anything if it's comfortable, right? So what does grit, resilience, um, what's another one? Yeah, well, those couple. They're the they're the things that get you through when it's not comfortable. So whatever we want to call that, that's needed. It's when we are constantly leaning on that in every aspect of our life because everything's difficult. So the hero's journey is full of resilience or grit or bravery or courage or whatever it is. But it depends on where the essence or the intention or where the resilience has to come from. If the resilience is, I will push through this discomfort of being on the wrong path because I'm resilient, well, that's wrong in my mind. You're using resilience the wrong way. You're now putting up with something because you're going to push through that because you're not going to change to where you feel you need to be and use that resilience as part of the change process. So in that instance, we're sort of like, I am so resilient, I'm going to survive this relationship. I'm going to be so resilient, I'm going to push all the way through, even though my heart and soul is telling me I need to be over there. But don't worry, I never quit. I'm not going to fail. I'm going to be resilient. Or all of these things. But if, a bit like me, Ash, you've stared stuff directly in the face, all these things that you didn't necessarily want to have to change, all these things that you had to look around and go, why am I carrying this? Why do I need to be the instigator? Why do I need to be the catalyst? Why can't someone else? I'll support them. And your spirit says, this is you. And it wasn't comfortable. There was something that took you from where you were, not just faith, not just belief, but to actually hold yourself physically as opposed to being an absolute mess. That was some sort of resilience, courage, strength, whatever it is, that was tuned and helped you through that point so you could release something else. So again, you know, those circular references, you get an Excel, it sort of says, sorry, no, you can't do that because we're going to go in a damn circle. I kind of feel we've gone there.
Well, it's really interesting because I think I observed you use resilience. This is the interesting thing. I'm going to say this in a different example. Sometimes people will say, oh, are you Christian? And my answer to that is, it depends.
Go on.
Sounds like a bizarre answer, doesn't it?
Well,
Because
it
for
sounds
some
like a
people,
very
or like,
soft
do you
answer.
believe
Yeah.
in God? And again, my answer is, it depends.
Well,
Because
okay, now
it's not
my brain's fried. Okay.
it's not a word that matters. It's how we imagine that word working that matters. And so if someone says, do you believe in God? But how they imagine the word God is a bearded man in the clouds who has a whacking stick and punishes everyone and sends them to fire. No.
God, this needs to be
So
another episode because I've got so
So
many
if you're
questions.
asking me, do I believe in God? And there's a bearded, angry man in the clouds, my answer to that is no.
Okay.
But how I imagine the word working of God is extremely different to that. And it's the same. Are you religious? Well, it depends. Because what is religion to you? And if they are like, oh, religion is following rules and doing this and doing that and thinking you're better than people and killing people because of your religion and all this sort of stuff. Well, no, I'm not religious, not even in the least. I'm anti-religion, if that's your definition of religion. But religion to me means something different. And so this is the point that I'm kind of making about resilience, is that the word resilience, because of some very good marketing that really peaked around 2019, if you just go to Google and type in define resilience or resilience meaning or whatever, there was a thing called the Resilience Project, and it kind of came out, and I'm not poo-pooing the Resilience Project, by the way. I think at the heart, resilience is a very good thing. It's just how we imagine the word working.
Mm-hmm.
It peaked around 2019. It went absolutely crazy. So I'm going to give you some synonyms for the word resilience.
Okay.
Flexibility,
Interesting.
plasticity,
Okay.
pliability, spring, give, durability, adaptability, hardiness. Now, for a lot of people, they're not the synonyms that they would have used for the word resilient.
No, hell no.
And I think this is the most important thing, because the word resilience has been absolutely bastardized to mean that we push through, that we suck it up, that we toughen up, that we harden up. And actually,
Almost like courage.
the antonyms, so the opposites of the word resilience, rigidity. Isn't that interesting? Because quite often the word resilience is used in this push through, toughen up, override it,
Grit.
suck it up kind of mentality. And that has, like, for me, I look at it and go, it infuriates me, because we've absolutely bastardized this word, and we've brought in this mentality of you've just got to push through, you've just got to keep going. I see it in workplaces where people are praised for surviving, and therefore their necessity to rely on survival mechanisms just in order to be worthy, just in order to be enough goes through the roof. And this is the biggest cause of burnout in almost everyone that I see with burnout, is they have a very dysfunctional relationship with overriding their nervous system. So that'll happen at work. It happens in parenting. It happens in sport. It happens in healing and recovery. So the physiology of override, what happens is when we push through our stress responses instead of actually responding to them, imagine like every one of those little stress responses is a little signal. It's just a little like warning sign. every time we override that rigidly because we think that we just have to push through for the outcome, instead of
Mm.
listening to it and responding to it, it has to get louder. And it's going to get louder and louder and louder and louder. And so override long term of this dysfunctional word resilience, or use of the word resilience, leads to chronic allostasis, which is like your body moves into a dysfunctional state more permanently. It can start to shut down, chronic illness, autoimmune conditions, reactivity. Like, it's going to start showing up everywhere else in your life. And so this is why there's actually been quite a bit of research on this, that supposedly the most resilient people were most likely to die of cancer. It's fascinating.
Okay.
Like, when you actually start to look at some of the literature around early what is it called? Early mortality.
Mm.
People who have been the most resilient from that dysfunctional definition, who constantly override and who constantly push through, are more likely to die sooner.
Yeah.
Whereas
Okay.
I think, so I don't want to blur the lines of our next episode where we go into, well, what's the healthier definition of it? But what are some signs that you're overriding? Well, you can't rest, you can't stop. For me, signs of overriding is my, I guess it feels like impulsive or compulsive. I don't know which is the best word to use, but it's like I'll get up and go straight into whatever it is I've got to do. And then I'll eat and go straight back into it. It's like I just can't stop, can't rest, and I'm overriding. I think we spoke previously about my Garmin watch being really, really helpful because it gives me a checkpoint, a reference point where my body battery goes, oh, I woke up and my body battery was 13 after supposedly sleeping. I'm in a chronic state of override and I'm not recovering. So I need to take better care of myself.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting. And like everything you noticed, you're noticing it, I think. What I'm trying to get to is the season I'm in as we record this is I'm in a season of resilience. We'll call it that. But I can't.
So without using the word resilience, use other words to describe the season you're in so we can get a clear picture of how you're using the word.
So the thing is, what I'm being called to do intuitively is completely opposite what I feel I need to be doing, right? From a material world.
Yeah.
When it comes to the things that just can't stop, won't stop, especially being a dad, right?
Yeah.
There are some things you can sort of put a pause on, but there are other things that you can't.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like and I can't necessarily, and it took me a while to figure out what I was meant to be doing because it kind of felt that it was something invisible that was draining. If I could pinpoint it, I could do something about it. But it's sort of like the awareness of it took time. And the awareness was, for me, that got sort of pointed out in all of this, is the fact that while I do prioritize myself, there was a greater depth of understanding what that meant, especially when it came to third-party relationships or things that I was doing for my children, which I felt as though if I wasn't doing it for them, I felt like I was letting them down, as opposed to being called to do it. Yeah. Even though I could logically say I'm doing it by choice, which I am, but the choice that I'm making comes with an energy which is not exactly what I should or what I want to be bringing to it.
Yeah.
There's a sense of obligation, a bit of gruff, a bit of So it's quite interesting because you've kind of blown my mind a bit about this whole resilience, because resilience to me is like shield and sword.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe we're confusing courage and bravery and all of these things with resilience.
Exactly.
Because as you were talking about the definitions, I'm picturing a palm tree getting battered in a tornado,
Uh-huh.
right? Now, the funny thing is, I also put it with something that it had to survive, right?
Yes.
So resilience only kicks in when it ain't pleasant,
Yep.
when things are not comfortable, right? It's not sort of something that's like, I'm in my season of resilience and I feel great. No. It's sort of something that's sort of like, oh, I've had to be resilient because something's happening that I'm not quite ready for, or I'm not quite wanting, or it's not quite comfortable, that I'm having to survive or navigate or whatever it is in a way. And it seems like it's about being malleable, pliable,
Yes.
those kind of things.
It still has
So,
a level of capacity. So the actual definition, the number one definition is the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. And so, yes, there is a level of withstanding hard things.
well, I mean, it's not like, it's the way you celebrate achievements or things like that. It's not coming from a place of, when I grow up, I really want to, live a life of resilience.
Yes.
It's
So
not a
I
goal.
I think this is really important in getting this clear because, like I said, the synonyms were things like flexibility, pliability, plasticity, elasticity, durability, adaptability. It's not like saying, oh, well, we're going to increase the resilience of these palm trees by moving them from this tropical storm location and going to put them in the desert because there's no storms there. That's
Hmm.
not the kind of adaptability we're talking about here. But it might be like I'm imagining, we've spoken about this analogy before. It's one of my favorites with the palm trees and the storm. But the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties is that palm tree's capacity to bend in the storm,
Flex, yeah.
the palm tree's capacity to, once the storm passes, grow thicker in the base so that it's stronger for the next storm. Like these are more the adaptations, the flexibility, the responsiveness to the challenge, not adapting the situation to just eliminate the challenge. So I think
Hmm.
when it comes to, when I imagine this in the human nervous system, the reality is we have a capacity, and often because of life stresses, we will have a limited capacity to withstand that stress. And so we get pushed over the edge quickly. We become snappy. We become, you know, reactive.
Yeah,
But
well, hmm.
I want you to then imagine a parallel universe. What resilience actually looks like is being able to do the inner work to expand the capacity of the nervous system so that in the face of those exact same situations and scenarios, i.e. the kid spills their drink, or someone doesn't respond to your text, or someone steals your car park, or doesn't reply to an email, whatever it might be, that you're now no longer experiencing the same level of stress as you were in the face of that to begin with. But if you do experience a stress response, you still need to adapt and respond to that stress response, not push through it. We don't increase the size of the bucket by forcing more water into the bucket. It's still going to
Hmm.
overflow.
And that might sort of look like, trying to hold the emotions in,
Yeah.
trying to pretend everything's okay by forcing a smile
Yeah.
because of, say, performance. As opposed to sort of
100%.
going, oh, it's quite windy. I'm flexing a bit because of the situation. I'm not liking it. How's it feeling in the body? What do I need to do? If I'm around people, do I need to
Yes.
remove myself? If people are sort
Exactly.
of saying what's wrong, just sort of go, I'm feeling some big emotions. I need to go
Need some
and do
space.
something. So being
Totally.
a little bit more vulnerable. And if you can't be vulnerable around those people, ask yourself for in the future, not for right now, because you don't need to make snap decisions right now. Am I in the
Yes.
right room? And then
Exactly.
All of these things are sort of you don't bypass the feeling. You can't just sort of close your eyes and picture and imagine you're not in a storm. You're in a fucking storm. Like,
Yeah,
it's blowing.
exactly.
Stuff's going everywhere, and chances are you're not the only person in that storm, right?
Yep.
You're not the only thing in that storm. It's just, if the measure of success is you can stand in a storm and gaslight yourself or imagine you're not in a storm,
Yeah,
oof. And that used to
exactly.
be a
And
metric that I used to live by. It's not about being in the storm. It's about sort of going, the storm doesn't affect me. Well, it
yeah,
did.
exactly.
It was just going to come out just a little bit later, just a different aspect, a little bit
Totally.
more.
And I resonate so much with that. And even just like recording our last episode, was that resilient of me to still show up and record? Yes, it was. But not because I pushed through the emotions that I was feeling or anything else. It was resilient because I checked in with myself, I recognized my capacity, and I made it okay to record a podcast on the floor of my bedroom.
Hmm.
That's the adaptability, that's the bending, that's the flexibility that we're talking about. Like, that's resilience. And sometimes in some really practical daily life examples, being able to so dysfunctional resilience might look like, oh, I'm absolutely exhausted, I've got nothing left in the tank, but my house is a mess and the dishes aren't done, and I cannot be okay unless my house is clean when I go to bed. I'm going to push through and override my nervous system so that I can clean the house, meet the external expectations or obligations, because they say that unless my house is clean, I'm a failure. That's the override. It the dysfunctional resilience, and that's not
And
healthy.
I'm just keeping it together. If you're
Yeah.
just keeping it together, let it crumble. But one question I did want to ask you, and to share that, let's just assume that for last week you checked in with your body and it wasn't okay to record. The funny thing is, for me, it's sort of like now sort of saying you checked in with your body, you didn't record, and that shows resilience. To me, like my old program is sort of going, is that resilience or is it not? Hang on. So talk us through that.
Yeah, because you're recognizing that you're at the limit of your capacity. And so when I'm okay, this is where discernment is really, really important, right? Because there are some times when I can check in with my body and then I'm going to look at the important versus urgent thing. So recording a podcast, I actually did run through my mind that morning where I was like, I don't think we've ever missed a week. I think we've pushed out a podcast.
One week where I was being very resilient, and I had to, so resilient I didn't show up that week. So resilient I didn't edit it. So resilient I didn't put it out there. But I think
You were
it was
being
because
responsive.
I'd been resilient in the old-fashioned way for too long, and the body just sort of went, "Sorry, sunshine."
Crashed. Exactly.
Yep.
What a great example. So in that case, we never put a podcast episode out for 1 week because you pushed and 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 overrode your nervous system for so long to a point that you crashed, and then you didn't have capacity to be able to do what needed to be done to put an episode out. So that was dysfunctional resilience. But when I checked in with myself, I actually had this conversation with myself and I went, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? We don't put a podcast episode out for a week or two. Is that actually okay? And my thought was, actually, yeah, the world's not going to end. And then I thought, how do I feel if I cancel it? I feel more stressed because I've got to find time in an already packed schedule at the moment. How do I feel if I record it? Well, and this is where I got to. If I have to be away from Buddy, I feel guilty because I feel like I feel like I want to spend the last few hours with him close by, because at that time he was following me around and I wanted to be with him. Disregard the fact that I then sat down with him and he got up and walked out. That's okay.
Go back to last week's episode to unpack that
For
part
the
just a little bit
context of
more.
that. That's okay. But again, it was this constant journey of checking in with myself and going, well, how does it feel if we do this? How does it feel if we do that? And sometimes sometimes it's recognizing. So responding is recognizing the capacity that we currently have. And resilience is coming from expanding that capacity. But overriding is not it.
So let's give the old definition of resilience a new name that is probably more suited.
Push through.
Push through. I'm feeling it's in the, like, I don't think there's like one word that can encapsulate it, unless you people, if you think of a word, show notes. But I'm kind of thinking it's that sort of push through with a lovely flavor of self-abandonment. And that self-abandonment is that internal knowing. Like, you're not fighting with yourself because the idea came from yourself to not do it. And the idea to do it came from yourself based on what you need to do in this reality to keep everything moving. Responsibilities, right? We've all been there.
Yeah.
And it's then sort of going, okay, well, am I self-abandoning for the responsibilities? Because I think at the end of the day, you play a short game, you can check the list to say, did I do everything that I needed to do today? Yes. Move out into a long game, chances are the consequences could be as serious as early mortality, as Ash has said.
100%.
Or,
This is something that drove me mental in the business coaching space. I was a part of a business coaching community for a few years, and one of the cultural values was my word is my bond, and I do what I say I will do. And this was, to me, it sounds very admirable, doesn't it? But I was very open with my teammates every quarter, and I said, I'm just going to be clear that I'm not committing to doing what I say I'll do. And I'm going to let you know that my word is not my bond, because the person who spoke the word is not the person who's showing up to do it. And life happens. So
well,
I'm going to reserve the right.
Your word
to
can
be
be your
flexible.
bond, and but the bond can also be, in this moment in time, the way I feel, this is what I want to achieve. I will achieve it in this energy, in this present moment, based on this. But as word is my bond, I am human and things change and I will adapt with those changes.
Yes.
My word is my bond, right? What it means is that sort of rigidity that sort of says, in this moment in time, you are not allowed to evolve past this point in time. So if something changes, and look, a lot of the time we look at this negatively, you're just looking for an excuse. And ultimately, and I'm feeling this as I'm saying it, every time I've changed my mind in the past, or I've looked at someone, every time I've looked at someone who's changed their mind, I've immediately gone to, you didn't mean it when you said it. That's it.
Exactly.
However, they could have meant it for that time.
Yep.
In that energy, in that space, with that knowledge.
Yep.
And
in the
things change.
capacity that they had at the time. And this is where, again, bringing awareness to the word capacity and the definition of resilience is based upon the capacity that we have. And this was something of, I guess, maturity that I had to develop, was that the version of Ash who was sitting down, with a coffee in the comfort of my home, fresh, just had a nice big night's sleep, gets an email and says, hey, Ash, can you do this thing? And she looks at the calendar, and on the calendar, there's a gap that's big enough for the thing. And she says yes to that thing because the gap's big enough, from her nice big capacity nervous system, who's sitting in the comfort of her home at the computer. And then there's the Ash who, prior to that vacant gap, just had 5 full days of a conference, and then had this thing, and then had that meeting, and then had to travel here and had to fly there, and now it's at the gap. She does not have the same capacity in her nervous system as the Ash who sat in front of the computer and said yes to the thing. And so this is where we as humans really have to get real with an intimacy of our nervous system, and not just look at the time cost of things, but look at the energy cost, and try and have, like in business, I look at my cash flow forecast and I put in the projections for many, many months in advance of what I project the cash flow forecast to be. And I can see anytime we're going into the red. I can see it in advance. And so I started to apply the same kind of thinking to my calendar and kind of went, okay, let's look at energy forecast. I know that at around that time, it's my kid's birthday party. I'm going to be organizing that. I know that we've got this travel there for personal life. I know we've got this and this and this. And even though that's only a 2-hour block, what version of me is going to be showing up for that 2-hour block? And actually trying to get an understanding and have empathy ahead of time based on that prediction of the energy cost of things in life, because those things are reducing my capacity. And it pushes me into my only option being I have to override. I've got no choice. So I don't know if that's helpful, but maybe we can talk more about sort of where to from here in a healthier way in our next step.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes back to, and this is a theme that I'm circling around a lot, or bigly at the moment, is performance and pretending.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if we step back and look at how many things have we put in place to try and pick up on the fact that we assume people are pretending or there's a performance. So, the my word is my bond kind of thing would be one of those things where it's sort of like people will say it because they're meant to say it because that's what they should be saying.
It's the expectation.
There's an expectation. I'm in this business meeting or I'm in this group of high performers, so I need to be doing that. So I'll say it, but then come back in the next quarter and say it again with no sort of action.
And be praised when I override my nervous system and be shamed when I don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, because what's the metric? If it's KPIs, unless they're self-centered KPIs around, hey, you know what? My emotional battery was at like 90% for the last three months. Great. Why are you here? So again, check the room. Are you in the right one? But I think it's around all of that. And I think this is where it ties into, and I won't open this can of worms, but if people just come back to one thing and be unapologetically authentic, this is why it's so hard, because there's been so many bloody masks and performance and traditions and conditioning and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. If we just come back and we just sort of cut through and go, actually, no, yeah, no. And it's
yes,
so layered.
Back then, but no now. No back then, but yes now. Like, we can change our mind. I love that you raised that as well.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, that's evolution. So, and like you add abundance and scarcity mindset conditioning and all of that. And like, there's so many layers to it. But if you just come back to finding places where you can be authentic, that maybe pushes you just a little bit, flex that muscle, and then try a little bit more, try a little bit more, try a little bit more. That's a bit of a step. But yeah, wow, this is what I say, a resilient episode. Do I dare?
It's interesting. I'm so glad that it blew your mind, and I would love to hear from people. How did that challenge you and challenge your definition of resilience? And where do you see that dysfunctional version of resilience show up in your own life? Where did you learn it? What were you praised for that taught you that you had to override in order to be okay?
Well, certainly for the definition, like I brought in the dysfunctional one right into the episode with us. So,
yes.
Wow, love it. All right, everyone, till next week. Au revoir.
Bye.